over the last couple of months. But the other thing that this could potentially be is an attempt at readjustment or correction by the Trump administration, in that one of Trump's closest kind of allies and supporters, and someone who's clearly very influential in the administration, is coming out to kind of push back against the recently implemented policies. So I'm thinking, or maybe hopeful is the right word, that this might be a signal that the administration is considering walking back some of those policies.
Imagine huge Tesla dealerships in Canada are empty, warehouses are empty, and the streets are the smoking wreckage of burned-out electric cars. This is not a scene from a dystopian movie. This is reality, coming just weeks after the announcement of new trade duties. Starting with a single policy statement, the US set off an avalanche, and now we've witnessed perhaps the most destructive trade war in North American history. Why did Canada decide to act so tough? What exactly did Donald Trump say, and what does Elon Musk have to do with it?
So there are a couple of things that might be going on here. So on the one hand, it could be that just at a very basic level, Musk has quickly observed a 40% decline in sales in Tesla in Europe.
Behind the scenes of what's going on, there are billions of dollars, tens of thousands of jobs and political interests that have long gone beyond the auto industry. In this conflict, cars have become not just a commodity, but a symbol of independence, betrayal, and the struggle for sovereignty. Stones thrown through car windows with the words "We are not the 51st state," anti-Musk graffiti in downtown Toronto, protests at the border, and a sharp drop in air travel between the two once friendly countries are all links in the same chain.
And police in Italy are investigating possible arson after a fire destroyed more than a dozen Tesla vehicles. Elon Musk is calling the incident at a Rome dealership terrorism. This comes as Tesla has been the target of recent protests around the world.
But the real drama is playing out not on the streets, but in economic headquarters and ministries. Canada didn't just retaliate, it hit back. $30 billion in retaliatory tariffs, a shutdown of US supplies, emergency measures to support domestic production. Now imagine that this is just the beginning. Even today, analysts warn, if the conflict continues, it could completely disrupt decades-old supply chains between the US, Canada, and Mexico. Hit auto giants like Ford and General Motors, and even cause a wave of economic migration within the continent. Tesla is just the first victim, but hundreds of companies could follow. And while stocks plummet and factories cut production, ordinary citizens are left with the question, who will pay for it? The answer is all of us. The only question is the price, and how far both sides are willing to go.
Outperforming as well in some cases, doing better than Tesla. And you just have to think, how much more is this a sustained issue for Tesla going forward, given the fact that you have Elon Musk, who's been very forthright in his opinions, particularly weighing in on politics, particularly in Europe. We've just had the European elections, which Musk has been very focused on. But across the piece, when you look at the performance for Tesla in Europe, it's not just in small countries. There are a lot of countries where Tesla has been performing badly, including in Germany, in the UK, where it has been lagging, and Spain as well.
In this video, we will show you the hidden mechanisms of the new trade war. We'll tell you why Trump's statement was not just a mistake, but the trigger of a geoeconomic crisis. You'll see how one tariff can destroy an entire industry, and learn what role Elon Musk, the man whose name is now being hated not only on the streets of Canada, but also in the capitals of Europe, played in this. Stay with us, because right now the map of economic alliances is being rewritten before your eyes, and when the dust settles, the world will never be the same. When President Donald Trump announced 25% tariffs on auto imports, most analysts saw it as just another episode in a string of his high-profile policy moves. In reality, however, the move was not just an economic decision, but a catalyst for conflict, the effects of which began to reverberate much faster than anyone could have predicted. Markets swung, but the real warning signs began to come not from Wall Street, but from the quiet streets of Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver, where the first pockets of protest began to emerge. At first, they seemed spontaneous, almost symbolic: a few burned US flags, a couple of slogans about national dignity, solitary pickets outside the embassy. But within 72 hours, the situation changed.
Teslas are being torched across the country. Dealerships shot up and set on fire. Spray paint to vandalize and make a statement. People in Southern California are getting notes on their Teslas, calling them complicit Nazis for owning electric cars.
From the moment the news about the tariffs was broadcast on the Canadian television channel CBC, thousands of people began to fill the streets of major cities. In a matter of days, protests spread across 14 provinces. Their participants were united not so much by their dissatisfaction with Trump himself as by the sense of humiliation they felt. In the minds of many Canadians, the imposition of tariffs was a demonstration of the US attitude toward Canada, not as a veiled partner, but as a vassal appendage to be disregarded. Emotions were fueled by statements by US officials, including an interview with the US trade representative in which he stated that Canada has long lived off the US market and that it's time to pay the bills. These words were taken out of context, but it was enough.
That's from the European Automobile Manufacturers Association. People just choosing with their wallets to not buy Teslas because of that Musk-Trump association. And actually here in London, an activist group called Everyone Hates Elon actually have been hacking bus stop signs with posters. I actually passed one yesterday. First, I wasn't quite sure what was happening, but it said the words 0 to 1939 in 3 seconds. Illusion here, 0 to 60 in like 3 seconds or something. But this poster was alluding to the start of World War II, and the image was of Musk giving that hand salute that we saw at Trump's inauguration that many have attacked as a Nazi gesture. Musk, though, has neither admitted or denied what he was doing. But we're seeing the knock-on effect of that anti-Musk anger across Europe and in terms of sales.
Not only did posters begin to appear on the streets, but also fire. The first Tesla dealership in Calgary was set on fire on the third night after the tariffs were announced. Montreal, Edmonton, Winnipeg followed. In total, there have been 27 arsons and more than 90 incidents of vandalism against American brands in the first 2 weeks, according to Interior Canada. These include not only Tesla, but also Starbucks, Walmart, and Home Depot. Many of them were targeted not so much because of their economic component, but because of their symbolic importance as agents of American expansion. Particular public attention has focused on Elon Musk. His recent public statements in support of Trump's policies, including the controversial phrase "America must protect its leadership at all costs," were taken as a direct insult. A movement called Boycott Tesla sprang up on social media, garnering more than 1 million followers in 3 days. Some activists began distributing leaflets in Canadian cities with an image of Musk in the uniform of an American soldier from World War II, and the caption, "He's not building the future, he's bringing war." Vandalism increased. Tesla cars were found with broken windows, covered with black paint and inscriptions such as "Traitor" and "Puppet of the United States." Against this backdrop, Canadian authorities realized that the matter was taking a political turn. Canadian Prime Minister Scott Hampton urgently called an emergency meeting of Parliament. In his speech, he emphasized that Canada would not allow dictate from the outside and that the country's economic security could not be hostage to other people's decisions. A day later, the first package of retaliatory measures was published. The introduction of mirror tariffs on American-made cars, sanctions against a number of American companies, tax breaks for domestic manufacturers, and a program of emergency aid to export-oriented enterprises.
I mean, the things that he's doing is not trying to make America better. He's ruining our infrastructure, every department in our government he's ruining, and he's right now destroying our economy. He's taken away all of our allies. We're a pariah in the world.
These actions became the starting point for the second wave, already systemic and state-organized. Reserve funds were used, some of which were earlier supposed to be used for green energy, but now they were urgently reallocated to support the auto industry and logistics centers tied to the US market. The total amount of the new program was $2 billion. These funds were used to compensate for losses, purchase equipment, support tax incentives, and create alternative supply channels. At the same time, the government initiated the largest information campaign in modern history. Television and the internet ran round-the-clock spots about the importance of national production, with ordinary workers telling how US policies threatened their future. In one clip that went viral, a Hamilton mechanic, laid off after a GM assembly plant closed, said, "I'm not against Americans. I'm against their policies. They took my job away from me. Who's next?" The tariffs proved to be only the tip of the iceberg. The economic impact began to show within the first week. More than 60% of auto parts produced in Canada were exported to the United States. As prices rose and contracts stopped, supply chains collapsed. Mass layoffs began. In Ontario alone, 12 production lines were closed in the first 2 weeks after the conflict began, including those that provided Tesla with parts. According to the estimate of the Ministry of Labour of Canada, at least 85,000 jobs were at risk.
But they are not ruling out the possibility that this was arson. At the same time, as you just mentioned, there are groups that have been organizing ongoing and peaceful protests at Tesla dealerships around the world. These demonstrations targeting Elon Musk and his affiliation with the Trump administration. Italy's prime minister is said to be close friends with Musk, and there were reports that Teslas have been vandalized in her hometown in Italy. Diane.
Against this backdrop, society split. On the one hand, there was a wave of solidarity and a desire to maintain independence. On the other, there was a growing sense of anxiety about the economic future. Small businesses suffered just as much. Small enterprises that were engaged in supplying the US began to close down. Some experts began to say that if the situation dragged on, it could lead to a recession. In response to this challenge, the government announced the creation of the Economic Security Coordinating Council, a body designed to respond to any external threats. For the first time in the country's history, this council has been given authority, not only in the economy, but also in shaping information policy. Its task is not just to defend against American pressure, but also to reorient the national strategy from dependence to self-sufficiency. Thus, in the weeks following the imposition of American tariffs, the country found itself in the epicenter of not only an economic but also a political storm. The burnt-out TES became a symbol of something more, the last straw in the cup of patience. And while Canada's response seemed harsh, it reflected not only anger but also a desire for a new course. The only question is whether the balance can be maintained when duties cease to be numbers and become a cause for street fires and national rethinking.
KTLA Samantha Cortese joins us live with more on the wave of vandalism in protest of Elon Musk and his role in Washington. Sam?
Hi, Sharon, Micah. The ATF and FBI are collaborating with federal, state, and local law enforcement to investigate acts of domestic terrorism surrounding Teslas.
In the first weeks after the trade conflict began, events unfolded with frightening speed. But the real turnaround came when Tesla and its founder, Elon Musk, came into the public spotlight. Previously perceived as a visionary and a symbol of the future, he now found himself at the center of a barrage of criticism bordering on hatred. The aggravation of the situation happened almost imperceptibly. In the beginning, it was sporadic protests, then graffiti with his name on the walls of universities and business centers. And in a couple of weeks, photos of electric cars on fire began to spread in social networks. The lightning speed with which Tesla went from an object of admiration to a target of public anger struck even those who had long followed the political climate in Canada. The public mood has changed dramatically, and it has been felt especially acutely in university settings. One of the first incidents occurred on the British Columbia campus. Students blocked a Tesla Model X from entering the campus, surrounded the car and left dozens of accusatory notes on it. Among them were complimentary narcissism, trade collaborationism, and electric hypocrisy. The scene was captured on video, and within hours it had gone viral on TikTok and YouTube. More than 10 million views in 24 hours, all against the backdrop of a growing wave of boycotts of American goods. In this emotional heat, Musk became not just a businessman, but a symbol of a new American aggression hidden under the shell of technological progress.
Hey Diane, this investigation really just beginning, and one of the key elements will of course be the surveillance video, and investigators potentially have a lot of it to work with as they try to figure out what caused this fire. We know that surveillance footage has been turned over, including video from each of the cars, which could prove vital to understanding what happened here, because each vehicle has its own camera system that works even when the car is off, and 16 cars burned in this fire, and right now investigators don't know what caused it.
The situation was aggravated by Musk's own statements. In one of his interviews, he noted that countries that do not invest in the future are doomed to depend on those who build it. Although the remark was not specifically directed at Canada, the phrase sounded almost like an insult in the context of the rapidly growing crisis. A number of analysts considered it deliberate diplomatic sabotage, and several members of the Canadian Parliament publicly called for Tesla to be recognized as an undesirable company in the country. These calls were not made in a vacuum, they were followed by action. More than a dozen municipalities passed resolutions restricting Tesla service vehicles from entering environmental project zones, and Montreal cancelled a major contract to build electric charging stations previously awarded to a Musk subsidiary. But the aggression went far beyond formal statements. Already a month later, vandalism against Tesla was up 470% from the previous quarter. Some cars were found upside down on highways with broken windows and burnt interior trim. Several dealerships received anonymous threats before being temporarily closed for security reasons. In Vancouver, unknown assailants hacked into the internal control system of a Tesla car dealership and displayed on giant screens that read, "We are not your beta testers." It wasn't just an emotional outburst, it was a systemic wave of rejection in which economic discontent merged with moral protest.
We've accomplished more in 43 days than most administrations accomplished in 4 years or 8 years, and we are just getting started.
He praised all the domestic actions he has taken so far on immigration.
And I deployed the U.S. military and border patrol to repel the invasion of our country.
And spending cuts.
We are draining the swamp. It's very simple.
Meanwhile, in the United States, the situation was also deteriorating rapidly. The tariff increases imposed by the Trump administration began to affect real sectors of the economy. The automobile market suffered first of all. A month and a half after the tariffs came into force, several major car dealerships began to experience disruptions in the supply of cars. Models assembled with the participation of Canadian components began to disappear from the showcases, and their cost rose sharply. Ford increased the recommended price for some models by 6 to 9%, GM by 12%, and Chrysler suspended production of 3 sets of Jeep Cherokee, citing the instability of logistics chains. This price hike had an unexpected effect. The American consumer began to massively postpone the purchase of cars, including electric cars. This especially hit Tesla, which was caught between two pressures. On the one hand, the boycott in Canada and a sharp decline in loyalty in Europe. On the other, the decline in purchasing power in the United States. Internal company documents leaked to the press showed that first quarter sales fell nearly 19%, and in some regions hit anti-record levels from 2016. The company introduced a technical stabilization mode, which meant freezing new projects, cutting staff and suspending bonus payments to managers.
Tesla is a peaceful company. We've never done anything awful. I've never done anything awful. I've only done productive things. So I think we just have a deranged, there's some kind of mental illness thing going on here, because this doesn't make any sense.
The situation affected other industries as well. Soon after the automobile industry, logistics, agriculture, and retail were hit. Small farms supplying produce to Canada began to suffer losses. Export volumes dropped 38% in 2 months, and thousands of tons of farm products remained unsold in warehouses. In a number of counties in Iowa and Nebraska, food banks, temporary sites where farmers could donate produce free of charge to the poor to avoid total disposal, began to appear. This solution helped to partially preserve the reputation, but did not save from financial collapse. More than 1,500 farmer cooperatives across the country applied for debt restructuring.
We begin with the president's trade war escalating tonight. This evening, the retaliation against the United States, Canada, and the European Union responding quickly, just hours after President Trump's 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum coming into the United States.
Amidst all this, political divisions within the U.S. began to intensify. Republicans tried to justify Trump's tariff policy by the need for tough defense of domestic interests, while Democrats and independent senators accused the president of provoking a full-scale economic crisis. The escalation began with the leak of a confidential Commerce Department report, that explicitly mentioned the risk of a chain recession if the trade confrontation with Canada continued. Particularly alarming was the estimate of the social impact. Up to 800,000 job losses over the course of a year and rising poverty rates in border states were predicted.
Canada, the largest supplier of steel to the U.S., slapping new tariffs on $20 billion worth of U.S. goods that are sold in Canada. And the 27 countries of the European Union imposing retaliatory tariffs on up to $28 billion worth of U.S. goods sold in Europe, including Harley-Davidson motorcycles and Kentucky bourbon. President Trump with the Irish Prime Minister visiting the White House today. The president suggesting his tariffs won't stop here, saying, "Of course, I'm going to respond." And tonight, right here, the new poll showing 56% of Americans disapprove of President Trump's handling of the economy. The number's even worse now on the president's tariffs.
Special emphasis was placed on domestic entrepreneurship. In major cities such as Toronto, Calgary, and Halifax, technology enclaves, public-private laboratories emerged where startup businesses had access to preferential financing, legal support, and equipment. One such project, Econova Industries, specialized in developing next-generation electric motors. In less than 2 months, the startup team presented a prototype with energy efficiency 12% higher than Tesla's counterparts. The Ministry of Innovation immediately awarded the company a $42 million grant, sparking a wave of enthusiasm among tech entrepreneurs across the country. In parallel, a campaign to stimulate domestic consumption unfolded. The government held a nationwide campaign called Buy Canadian, during which the country's largest retailers reduced prices for locally produced products by 20 to 30% thanks to government subsidies. Stores labeled goods with special stickers with a maple leaf and the inscription, "Made with Independence." The campaign was not only effective but also deeply emotional. The country's residents felt they were participating in something more than just shopping, in economic self-defense. The most alarming signal, however, has been the drop in consumer confidence. According to a Pew Research poll, 59% of Americans believed that Washington's trade policy was hurting the domestic market, and 64% of respondents admitted that they were postponing major purchases because of rising prices. This sentiment quickly began to be reflected in economic indicators. Auto sales were down 14% from the previous quarter, and mortgage applications fell to their lowest level in 5 years. Small businesses in bordering states, especially Michigan and New York, began to close due to plummeting demand and rising costs. The negative backdrop has not gone unnoticed on the international stage. Some of the U.S. traditional allies, including Germany and the Netherlands, began to renegotiate bilateral agreements, fearing the spread of aggressive trade policies. Meanwhile, Canada announced a framework agreement with India and Indonesia to create new trade channels and investment funds in which the U.S. had not participated. This was the first step toward the formation of a new geoeconomic axis in which Canada sought an independent and strategically important position. The diplomatic tension culminated in a statement by Canada's foreign minister at the Davos Forum. He said bluntly that economic independence is not an ideology but a necessity. These words were applauded, but in Washington they were perceived as a challenge. New discussions began about the possibility of tough retaliatory steps, including sanctions against Canadian investment in the United States. Some members of Congress proposed suspending visas for Canadian businessmen involved in government projects. Against this backdrop, it became clear the trade war had turned into something more. It was not just a dispute over duties, nor was it a battle for market share. It was a transformation of global economic relations where familiar rules no longer worked and old alliances were coming apart at the seams. And while Canada could not compete with the US in terms of capital or influence, it proved that even a small country with determination could change the rules of the game. The question remained whether this course could stand the test of time and not lead to more instability, not only on the continent but around the world.